Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury.
And for those of you who were patiently holding on whilst we had our technical difficulties with the stream, thank you for doing so. This is our ill-fated, it would seem, electoral reform photo ID special, which we tried to do a couple of times before and were almost overwhelmed by technical issues this evening. But Simon has bravely battled through and we're good to go, are we not, Simon?
Well, we are now. We've just lost the original link, so people will only be getting this notification if they follow us in our various social media locations. So my apologies if those who wanted to watch the show aren't going to make it. But yeah, we are going out, and indeed, I can see that we do have an audience. So let's crack on, shall we? My apologies, everybody, while we frantically pulled our hair out, or at least I did.
Yes, indeed. So let's dive into the meat of photo ID. What's changing? How will this election be different to those of elections gone by, Simon?
So get a sense of deja vu. So in this election, if you want to vote in person at a polling station, you're going to need to take some form of voter identification with you. And about 4% of the UK population don't have the sort of photo ID that's going to be required. But we will cover later on in the show how you can, for free, get hold of some photo ID so that you are able to vote, or indeed make sure that you've got the link to register to vote, so register to vote on by post, so that you get basically a postal ballot, and therefore you won't need any ID anyway. So because it's not like the postie is going to like check it before you put it in the letterbox. So yeah, that's
what must I go armed with to cast my stone?
So if you want to be able to vote in person on May the 4th, you are going to need some form of voter ID. And apologies with the issues that we've been having. I'm just trying to reload up the graphics. So I'm just trying frantically to get to the page that I wanted. So you are going to be in need to take with you. So set a reminder on your phone, or leave a post-it note on the back of your door on election day. You're going to need to either take a passport with you, some form of local travel documentation. There's certain concessionary travel cards. I'll post in a second the link where you can go and find out all of the specific details of each of those things. Photo driving license, that doesn't need to be a full driving license. A provisional will be fine. Blue badge, other forms of government issued document. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just arraying the blue badge.
Yeah. So other government local issued documents, other biometric immigration document, a defence identity card, and national identity cards. If you're not a UK national that's entitled to vote, then you may be from a country that has those, or some form of proof of age card, an identity card with the pass mark. So that's the proof of age standards scheme mark. So you'll be able to use any of those, or if you don't have any of those, then you can get a voter authority certificate issued for free by the Electoral Commission via the electoral services team at your local council. So they will issue that for you. And in our thoroughness, we tested that process. I applied for one Saturday, and lo and behold, it rocked up. It rocked up the very next Thursday. So it came in less than a week. And literally that is a certificate that has a photo on it that you uploaded when you applied, and the information that's needed for that for you to be able to use it. But it's literally just a certificate, so don't expect some sort of card or something. Do watch out for that in the post. And it comes in a easily identifiable envelope, which has got orange strips in the corners. If I try and put that into the camera there, you can see that there are orange strips there. So do look out for that if you've applied online for one. But it comes very, very quickly, and it's easy to get. It's also worth mentioning that your passport, as long as you can visually be recognised as you, and the name that's on the passport is the name that you are on the electoral roll as, that will be fine. Your driving license, again, it needs to be a likeness of you with the name as you are registered on the electoral roll, but it does not have to have your current address. So your passport doesn't need to be in date. Your driving license doesn't need to have your current address. Essentially, what the officers in the polling station are doing is verifying that the person in front of them is the person that they say they are. So they're matching the name against, and then also matching your eligibility to vote against the electoral roll. So they'll ask for your name and your address, but they won't ask for anything else.
And interestingly, I've been in the research we've done. I said this. My notes tell me that this doesn't apply in Scotland and Wales, but I'm now doubting myself. So any of our Welsh or Scottish viewers, please double check online. But I do know for definite it does not apply in Northern Ireland, or rather, it does apply and has done for nearly 20 years. So voter ID in Northern Ireland was brought in 1986, when there was a genuine a real problem with, and we're going to give a new word alert here, personation, which is when somebody turns up pretending to be somebody they're not at a polling station. And during those elections in the mid 80s, over 160 people were arrested and convicted of such offences. So Northern Ireland moved first to a system where you had to turn up with something with your name and address on it. And then in 2003, they moved to full photo ID. So it will be their 20th anniversary this year round. So I guess that segues us into why photo ID now. Plenty of theories abound, Simon, in terms of why it's being brought in.
Yeah, indeed. There's I mean, the Electoral Commission carry out a survey every year, and they ask people about their confidence in the electoral system. And they ask them several things about what they feel should change. So it's interesting to kind of sort of, if I kind of start this off with the thing of, if you asked people, do they know what elections take place in their part of the country and how they work? It's not the full set of figures, but interestingly enough, the Electoral Commission's data is that if you asked people about UK Parliament elections, they'd say they'd know a little. 36% would say they'd know a little about UK Parliament elections and how they work and how to vote, and only 13%, or sorry, and 13% would say it exists, but I don't know but know nothing about them, or that they don't know about this type of election at all. If you look at local elections, 46% of people know a little about them, and 21%, so as many as 20, as more than a fifth of voters, it exists, but they don't know anything about them, or they don't know anything about this type of election at all. It's even higher for police and crime commissioner elections, where 39% of people know a little bit about them, but 49% know that it exists but don't know about the elections, or don't know about it at all. So there's some quite interesting numbers there from a point of view of, if we're trying to fix issues or engagement or satisfaction, if you like, with the electoral process, kind of seems there's a big thing to do there about educating the electorate about how different elections work. So there's that kind of to say. But if you asked people, and this is what the Electoral Commission did, if you asked them for their confidence, are elections well run? 74% of people said that they felt that they were very or fairly confident that they were well run. But as many as 22% said that they are not at all confident or not very confident in how well they are run.
That's 1 in 5 adults are kind of nervous of the current electoral system. So I guess that segues on to the question of what have we got any explanation as to why they feel like that?
Yeah, we have. That's broken down. I won't go through the whole list because it's a bit of a list, but basically, the biggest contributing reason that people cited was that TV or press coverage is biased or badly presented. 46%. Hope they weren't talking about us there.
No.
42% said that the voting system is unfair and outdated, or I want a different voting system. 41% said that campaigning is based on incorrect information and made untrue claims. Good grief, are they saying that leaflets aren't necessarily accurate?
Politicians lying? Good God, we need a
Um,
bar chart for that.
37. Here's one I prepared earlier. The 37% said that elections are affected by fraud or corruption. So bear in mind, we're putting in
Ooh.
place photo ID, but only 37%. I mean, it's still a large number, but 37% said that they felt that elections are affected by fraud or corruption.
Now, in a
31 Hmm?
yeah, so in a statistical way, because I think it's important we reflect on that's 37% of the people who said that they were concerned. So if we
Yes.
play
So
with the
it's not of
numbers,
the
it's about
sample
it's
as a whole.
yeah, yeah. So it's about 7% of the total electorate believe that there is fraud and corruption, or potentially fraud and corruption taking place. Now, I haven't got a slide for it, but the Electoral Commission um, basically said there was no evidence for that. If they looked back over the previous 5 years, and there had been 11 convictions and 16 cautions issued. So 27 folk in 5 years, so about five per year. Now, what they did say is that not all of those were voter fraud, um, but also that a number of issues were dealt with words of advice from the police. So the statistics, it's interesting. When we spoke to Terry a week or two ago, that thing about their perception of wrongdoing and provable wrongdoing, there seems to be quite a significant gap there, doesn't there?
It does, and the survey goes on to ask what people would want done in order to improve that. So you see these figures that we've just quoted, but in contrast to those, if you ask people whether they're satisfied with the electoral process, 81% of people are satisfied with the electoral process, which is down slightly from 86% at a high last year, but still 81%. So that would imply that there's 19% that aren't satisfied with it. But
Mm.
there seems to be, when you look at, is photo ID going to be the thing that's going to solve their dissatisfaction? Well, let's have a butcher's of that one. So if I pop that one up, so which one of the following would be most likely to increase your satisfaction with the process of voting at elections? 26% of people that answered said a proportional voting system. 17% if it was possible to vote online, and 16 increased security against electoral fraud, and 15% said that nothing would increase my satisfaction. So at least they're being honest in their determination not to be
Yeah.
any more
Yes.
pleased with it. And 12% more information on the parties and candidates standing and their policies. So again, it
Well,
kind of speaks to that education thing of, and voters having armed themselves with the information that they need to cast their votes is obviously a slightly different question to the kind of, essentially, are we confident that elections are honest in that sort of way? So yeah, it doesn't kind of speak to the masses crying out for, there's tons of personation going on.
mm,
Is there's a belief, or there seems to be a feeling that that's the case? But as you said, when we interviewed Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, Terry Norton, the other week, I'm pretty sure that when Terry and his colleagues organise where to put police resources, stretch as they are, would they be sending police officers to where people think crime happens, or where crime is actually happening?
yes, and I mean, there's been quite a run up to this, hasn't there?
Mm,
In terms, now, interestingly, the Electoral Commission first basically suggested photo ID back in 2014, and part of their sort of rationale was almost a little bit, well, kind of everyone else is doing it. So the vast majority of countries in Europe require photo ID to vote, and it's fairly commonplace all around the world. I think the key piece is that the majority of those European countries also have a mandatory photo ID scheme. So,
yeah.
again, we won't take the lid off that particular can of worms. So it's been a long time coming, and I think, we I know that there were some trials done as if you want to go looking online, for my political scribblings, I wrote about this for Star and Crescent back after our local neighbours Gosport had their very own photo ID trial, or in fact theirs I think was a you had to bring proof of name and address, and I think that was back in 2018.
It was indeed. So they were one of the trial areas where trials of photo ID took place. You're absolutely right, in 2018. And indeed, the Electoral Commission did a report on how many people, and we use Gosport because it's the most local example to us, but how many people in Gosport were turned away at the polling booth out of an electorate of 62,000? How many were turned away, and how many came back with photo ID, and how many didn't? I would ask you to guess, but I know that you already know the answer, so I'm just going to put it on screen. So again, out of that electorate of 62,000, 47 were turned away with wrong ID, 73 were turned away without ID, and of those 120 that were turned away, 54 didn't return. So 45% of the people that were turned away didn't come back. But that 45%, those 54 voters, only represent 0.4% of the electorate.
And interesting, because that sort of mirrors the stats that I've got from the London School of Economics, who also did a bigger piece. There were several trials in 2019, and across all of the trials, they saw 2,000 people turned away, and of those 750 didn't come back. So, a sort of slightly higher return rate from theirs, but in the same sort of ballpark. So, we've got that situation where those that are kind of, invested to vote, it seems that, even if they have turned up ill-equipped, as it were, that their motivation to vote means that they're going to make sure that their voice is heard.
Yeah, indeed. And although there are, I mean, you can also, so the concern would be that, yes, there are going to be some people that will be disenfranchised by the need to vote, and they're actually disproportionately spread amongst our communities. So we said it at the start of the show, that about 4% of the UK population, sorry, the GB population as a whole, don't have the necessary photo ID that they're going to need to vote in person in May. However, when you look at how they split into different kind of communities, 10% of those are renters from housing associations, 14% of them are unemployed. Sorry, not 14% of them. The number without the photo ID, is 10% in those with housing association rents, 14% in who are unemployed, and 17% are renting from a local authority. So, for example, in those groups, they are much more likely not to have photo ID, so therefore potentially more likely or more at risk of not being able to vote in May.
Yes, and I think those are very interesting stats, because we're asking the question why, and we know that there are various hypotheses out there, including some from local councillors who are voicing the concern that this is a construct to disenfranchise, or to create a barrier for the effectively the poorer end of society, who would be less likely to vote Conservative, to effectively, there are hints towards gerrymandering in terms of which is what's behind this. I'm not sure that those kind of claims really stand any scrutiny. Again, it's further reinforced by, I think, in London, the Oyster card. If you have a senior citizen's Oyster card, you can use that to vote. If you have a younger person's Oyster card, that is not sufficient ID. But when you go and do the digging around to get a senior person's Oyster card, you have to present all the necessary bona fides that you would do to get photo ID. Whereas if you're a younger Oyster card user, you don't need to rock up with all of the appropriate documents. So I guess the the why piece. Is that a good time now to talk us through, again, how difficult or easy was it for you to um to get a certificate of authentication to prove that you are Simon Aloysius Pilchard
So,
Sansbury?
um, for actually, to be honest, for a website that was designed by people that work for government, actually, it was really bloody simple. Um,
Oh,
you literally click the link. You filled in your name, your address. You need your national insurance number. You can apply without it. It just might make it slower, more difficult to get you your voter authority certificate. But you put that information in, and if you don't have your NI number, you can find it on your payslip. It's quite easy to do. You upload a digital photo. So most people these days have got phones or access to something to be able to take a photo against a plain, usual sort of things that you would for a passport photo on a plain background, wearing glasses if you wear glasses, but not wearing glasses if you don't, not putting any particular face, and obviously just a plain image of you facing the camera works fine. And literally I emailed that off and thought, well, we
yeah.
quite often expect that things that are organised by government to not actually necessarily work that quickly. But this is delivered by the democratic services team at the local council, so it's not like it goes off into some great big glorious hole in Whitehall for someone to sort
Mm.
out. This is actually dealt with by some, by basically by a local team. If they've got issues with the information that you're providing, or they need other forms of documentation to demonstrate that you're okay, to demonstrate the validity of your identity, then they will contact you and ask you for them. You can download the form and fill it in on paper form and send it off in the post if you want to. But essentially, if you want to apply for a voter authority certificate, you need to make sure that it is in the hands of your local electoral services team by, hang on, is
6
it?
working days before the election, which by my maths is by 5 p.m. on the Tuesday before the election, which is 4th, 3rd, 2nd,
So it's the
third.
25th. So basically,
Yes.
you want to get it to them, make sure it's in their hands by 5 p.m. on the 25th of April. Of course, applying online is a bit easier. I'm just popping the link there into the chat stream. But yeah, honestly, really, really simple. So if you are a person that does not have photo ID and intends to vote, one of your options is to get a voter authority certificate. So click that link, fill in the details, and get one. Another one of your options is to vote by post. And you can apply for that as long as that is in the hands of your local electoral services team or democratic services team, and that needs to be in their hands by 5 p.m. on the 18th of April. So 18th
The
of
week
April,
before.
if
Yeah.
you want to postal vote, and if you're not registered to vote at all, obviously you can't apply for these things if you're not registered to
Well,
vote, but you still
and that's
do that.
yeah. Well, and that's one of the interesting stats, isn't it? Is that there are the estimates are between 2 and 3 million people who do not have the photo ID, but there are actually 7.5 million who aren't registered to vote.
Yeah. So how much of that 2.5 million is in that seven odd million that aren't registered to vote anyway? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I feel a Venn diagram coming on. But yes, that is the
We don't have one.
that
Don't
is,
worry.
no,
Us,
no,
us
no,
haven't got that excited.
no. But to be fair, there is that element, isn't it, of with 7.5 million people disenfranchised enough not to register to vote. The key question, I guess, is as you say, how much of the overlap is there in terms of the people who don't have the photo ID? Because there was some concern expressed. I think at the end of February, I think there had only been 10,000 applications for the certificate out of the estimates of between 2 and 3 million. I guess you would expect that number to be relatively low because the amping up of the information and the all the kind of noise around it hadn't really started. But now, as you say, the system touch wood, appears to be running very efficiently. And I think you were 3-4 days, weren't you, to get yours?
Well, I applied on Saturday and I received it in the post on the Thursday. So,
Yeah. So
if you think working days, yeah, that's really, really good. Yeah. So I think that's kind of the thing, is that yes, people. I mean, at the end of the day, people will have their own views about what the motivation behind this is, and as we've discussed, about whether it really solves a particular problem that exists or whether it doesn't. But actually, if you're intending to vote, or you think it's at all likely that you're going to vote in May's elections, and we both think that it's important that you do, because it's your voice. You should have
yep.
it, regardless of who you intend to vote for. We're quite firm
We're
believers in
very pro-voting, aren't we?
pro-voting. As democratic examples go, voting, it's a good thing. You should do it, and often. But yeah, if you're thinking that you're not going to be able to vote because of a lack of photo ID, you can easily get some. If you can't do that, then you can apply for a postal ballot. And if you're not registered to vote yet at all in May's local election, and what's happening in your local area, or indeed you feel that you want to cast a local representation of how you feel about what the national government's doing, because some people do that,
No,
they're talking about
no,
local elections, then
it's not encourage people to do that.
however you want to use your vote, it's your vote. And if you don't have one already, you can register to vote by 11:59 p.m. on April the 17th, and the link is in the chat. So again, there's all of these ways to actually make sure that you don't miss out. Don't be one of those people on the day that doesn't remember to tell your stuff. So put a reminder on your phone, put a post-it note on the back of your front door to remind you to take your ID with you if you don't normally. If you're a driver, you've probably got your driving license with you all the time anyway. I'm sure you have, because you're meant to. But if you're relying on your passport, you might not carry that with you all the time. So yeah, you arm yourself with what you need to be able to go. And if there are delays caused at the polling stations because of voter ID requirements, do remember that if you are in the queue at 10 p.m., so polling stations closed at 10 p.m., if you're in the queue at 10 p.m., no matter how long the queue is, you are entitled to vote.
Absolutely. And so I think that segues us, really into the kind of last piece of our, of our analysis, which is, will this make a difference to the outcome of the elections? And is it a good idea, yes or no?
I don't know that this in and of itself is going to make as much of a difference to the outcome of the elections, because if the gospel example was anything to go by, what if only 0.4% of the electorate, and the turnout is probably between 20 and 40%, then is that really I mean, in some wards that could make a difference, but again, voters need to arm themselves with what they need to be able to go cast their vote, rather than allow their vote to be lost. So will it make a difference? I don't know, but I guess if there's some unexpected results, I should imagine there's bound to be someone claiming that it did.
Well, and as you know, we like a statistic and we like a spreadsheet, and we keep a close eye on voter turnout whenever we review our local elections. And I think there is a piece for me where, it's a bit of a double-edged sword in this case, isn't it? Because as you point out, the election, the turnout is relatively low. In some wards is agonizingly, disappointingly low. So, there is an argument that says anything that makes the democratic process harder should be avoided at all costs. As pro-voting people ourselves, that's one side of it. But there is a piece of me that thinks it is 2023, and I covered this in the piece that I wrote at the time. You need photo ID for many, many things. Now, I am a more mature gentleman. I do not go into the more lurid and lively night spots of Portsmouth. But I know, because my children have done in the past, that for you to get into those night spots, you must produce photo ID. And they scan it, such that should anything untoward happen in the club later, and their CCTV will match up your face with your photo ID, and they will hold you responsible. So there is a little bit of me that says, well, in 2023, it, it feels a bit antiquated to be able to just walk up, and if I quote the title of my article, I'm Brian, and so is my wife, and just be able to vote.
I asked us. I had a similar feeling, and I asked my daughter, who at the time that this kind of came out, would have been out going to entertainment establishments and such like, and I thought that there would actually be a despondency from people of that age that, it's just trying to, because a lot of them don't have passports, for example, to discourage them from voting. Because ironically, actually, the young, as much as they might be impassioned and idealistic, sadly they don't vote in large enough numbers, and the cynic might say, well, this is just a way to try to discourage more young people from voting. But my daughter made exactly the same point you have. I have to have ID for everything else that I go do. Why is this any different?
Yeah, and I think that is
So
that
yeah,
perfect example. I mean, my view is that, again, I would encourage all young people to vote once they sort of turn 40, 45, perhaps, to have reached full maturity and have made that political journey. But no, joking aside, I think we've got that situation now where this is becoming a reality, and again, I look at it from the point of view that you know ultimately you've got access through this process now to get free photo ID. Does it
yeah.
have your date of birth on it?
He says, hang on.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I've sprung that on you rather, but it
Yeah,
just struck me.
yeah, no, it hasn't. And the voter authority certificates, although they recommend you renew them, the renewal date of mine is 2033. So I'm presuming I'm going to look a lot different then. So that probably does make sense.
Yep.
But it doesn't have an expiry date. No, it doesn't have my date of birth on it. So it wouldn't be any use for me. It wouldn't,
Ah,
not that I think
so
that the cashier in Sainsbury's or Tesco is likely to ask, or
for you
ID
look
when
under 25, sir. Yeah, yeah,
when I
I
go to
might say.
buy some gin. I don't think that's likely, but nonetheless, it's a sheet of paper that allows you to vote, that you can very, very easily get hold of, or you can very, very easily vote, register to vote by post if you think it's at all likely that you might be away during the election. Don't forget, if you have signed up for a postal ballot, and you forget to send it off, because it needs to arrive at your local council offices by 10 p.m. on election day. If you've not sent it off, you can just go put it in a ballot box in any ballot box in your municipal area.
Oh, I never knew that. So
Yeah,
if I was to go for the postal vote, and being the disorganised chap that I am, I realise on May the 4th I have not
postal.
cast
Yeah,
my vote.
hmm
Yeah, then I
you
can
can
go and
just
pop it in the box.
go bang it in a box. Yeah. So there are actually lots of ways to do it. I do find it interesting that when you look at people's determination to vote, that's very different in general elections to it is in local elections. So it will be an interesting test to see what effect this has on the next general election, which should be sometime within the next year to 18 months, depending on how many changes of government we have in that time. And when you look at the percentage of people say that they always vote in a general election compared to a local election is 75% versus 57%.
Mm,
Sometimes voting is 14% versus 28%, and I never vote is 5% in a general election and 10% in a local election. So again, these are from the Electoral Commission's figures for 2022. So
yep.
I guess for
And,
me, go vote. Go vote.
well, and I think what you've touched on there, Simon, is a potential practicality issue, isn't it? And that's the only thing that I guess a local election isn't going to stress the system. You know, because we've all, you know, you and I, we cast our vote as regularly as we should, but in a general election, there does tend to be, particularly at sort of peak times, queues at polling stations. And I guess you know, that is the nervousness, isn't it? Is that if, you know, and it's not going to be for this time, but if in a future election, you know, you have got people who haven't come with the right, you know, with the right information, or that information, I guess, needs to be scrutinized in some way by the folk who are there at the desk with their big printout and a pencil and a ruler. If that slows things up, then I guess there is that logistical challenge, isn't there, of processing people through in the appropriate time frame. But I would guess with the turnouts that we see at local elections, that probably isn't going to stress the system this time around.
Well, hopefully not. I mean, the advice on the Electoral Commission's website, it talks about, to be honest with you, it talks about if you're unwell, don't go to the polling station. You can get an emergency proxy ballot if you contact your local council. And if you are going, do take a face covering with you. Take your own pen. So we're not in the times of COVID, but I think there's still the, you know, the recognition of those kind of things, just to, you know, just to kind of help you. But yeah, it might cause some more queues. It might cause a delay in processing each vote. But what's likely to be the delay is people not having ID or not knowing that they need ID, and then quite understandably being quite confused and perhaps quite irritated, and challenging the officers that are there on the day. So the best thing you can do is actually help the officers manning the polling station is to go with your photo ID and go prepared to show it, so that they can process you quite quickly, give you your ballot, you can cast your vote and be on your merry way, and feel comfortable and that warm inner glow of your contribution to making your local community better. That's still the things. But yeah.
So I guess in conclusion, our you know, it's solving a problem that doesn't exist, because to influence even a local election with turnout so very low, you're going to have to, you'd need hundreds of folk to rock up and pretend to be somebody they're not. So it isn't solving a problem that already exists. Are we going to agree that it doesn't feel like a massive barrier to the voting process?
Interestingly, as much as we talked about perception versus reality, I think the perception is that it will be a massive barrier, and it'll be a greater barrier for some people in our community than it will for others. But the reality is that you can easily get past that barrier. So yeah, I think there might well be lots of words exchanged about how much of a barrier it is, but whether it will be or not, we'll see after the election. But it's not that difficult to do. And interestingly enough, we talked earlier on about satisfaction in the electoral process, not necessarily confidence, but satisfaction. Northern Ireland, which has had voter ID for years, is actually behind the rest of the UK in voter satisfaction. It's actually slightly behind England. It's been catching up. It was about 20% behind, I think, over recent years, and in more recent years, it's kind of caught up. So it's not actually so far behind. But if we think this is going to make people believe in the electoral process more, or make people more confident that the vote is being counted more correctly, or if we think that this is going to address people's concerns about where electoral funding comes from, or the effectiveness or the veracity of political literature, both digital and in dead tree format, it's not going to address any of those things.
No.
Which are the big concerns that people do actually highlight in the responses to the Electoral Commission. And also, if the concern is about personation, nobody validated that the photo that I submitted was me.
No, we did toy, didn't we, with fraudulently applying for for each other's voter ID certificate, but we felt that might lead us both into issues with future podcasts and
from a
the
police cell,
police.
yes.
Yeah.
So
So we opted to play
not
by the
do
rules.
that.
So I guess
Yeah.
the key thing then is that have real insight into where you should cast your vote in this May's local elections, the place where you can hear clear and unbiased hustings for the election is here at the Pompey Politics podcast. And as we move towards the end of March and the start of April, we will be in full flow again. It would be fair to say at the moment, a little bit slow from candidates stepping forward, but we expect an avalanche, do we not, in the next few weeks, and we'll probably then have a massively hectic April as we try and fit them all in.
Yeah, we can. So as much as you can scan the QR code in the top left hand side of the screen to send you to our website, and you'll find all of the links there for the Electoral Commission. You'll also find the links there to get in touch with us if you are a prospective candidate at the local elections in May and would like to take part, or just ask us some questions about how our hustings work. But we've got about 4 wards so far where we've reached our criteria of at least 2 candidates wanting to take part in the hustings. So we just need to kind of schedule those in. But yeah, the nominations, so that's people registering that they want to stand in the local elections, don't close until 5 p.m. on the 4th of April, when the Portsmouth City Council have said that they'll have those updated on their website the next working day. So we'll know from then who people are, but as we get closer, inevitably people will start receiving leaflets with people's names and photos on, so it won't really be that much of a secret anymore as to who, if it is, still remains a secret anyway, as to who the candidates are. But yes, if you are a candidate in the local elections in Portsmouth and you'd like to take part in our hustings, please do get in touch. You can either message us on Facebook or you can email us. That's studio@pppodcast.uk. studio@pppodcast.uk, and we'd love to hear from you. As I say, all messages on Facebook, but do like, subscribe, share the heck out of things. And sorry, I'll let you were going to say something there, Ian. Sorry.
No, just if you're not prepared to take part in the hustings, I boo you loudly until my voice is hoarse. So yes,
Well,
do your democratic duty and step forward, irrespective of the party.
That's going to encourage them. But by all means, have a look at the hustings that we've done in previous years. We give the same. All of our questions have to be questions that can be asked of all of the candidates, and we have quite understandable stipulations about how, basically a 2-minute opening speech, the amount of time on each question with a short rebuttal or follow-up if necessary, and a closing speech from each candidate. And we do those in quite an amicable way, and they've gone rather well in the wards that we've been able to do them for previous years. So yeah, have a look, take part, get in contact with us if you've got any questions, and we can go through those. But if you're perhaps not immediately overwhelmingly enthusiastic, do still reach out. We can perhaps assuage some of your fears.
Nerves. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it'll all be good.
rather than boo for not taking part.
No, focus on the cat. The cat
Focus on the
loves
cat.
a husting.
You're controlling the planet from you're sat there with your headset on and your cat in your chair.
Exactly.
But yeah, so we're counting that.
Marvelously done. You've been listening to the Pompey Politics podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sansbury, and do join us next week at 6:27, or honestly 6:27, when we will be looking at the last full council meeting before the local elections. So that's the council meeting taking place on the 14th of March, when there's a plethora of exciting and interesting things on the agenda. So we'll go through those and go through the votes, and hopefully the council's streaming service will also be working. Maybe we've caught we've caught a virus off the council streaming service. I don't know.
Could happen.
Maybe there's that. But do join us next week, 6:27. Do like, follow, subscribe to make sure that you don't miss out on notifications when we go live. You've been listening to the Pompey Politics podcast.